Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Paula Smith, and I am Assistant Dean of Students in the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict. I'm super excited to spend some time with you in this session talking about Gonzaga University's commitment to community. Here's what we'll be covering today. I'll share a little bit about the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict and show you a quick video from our office. We'll talk a little bit about moral disengagement concepts, which I'm hopeful will provide some tips and tools that provide insights to you while working with students as emerging adults. We'll spend some time talking about the bumps and bruises of decision-making in the college environment and how we try to move students towards moral engagement and maturity. I'll provide general information about university expectations and where you can find that information, as well as a little bit about our accountability processes. And lastly, some of the slides will discuss strategies for how we can partner with you and collaborate with you towards meeting the needs of your students. So what is the Resolution Center? We are the office on campus that is primarily responsible for reconciling issues of student misconduct. And that includes our alternative resolution programs, our formal student conduct proceedings, as well as conflict resolution services that we provide for students. I think we have the best job on campus. We have an opportunity to infuse mission into all of the work that we do. And we are committed to trying to provide transformative opportunities when we work with students, helping them to learn to engage in reflective thought, critical thinking patterns, ethically discern decisions that they're making in congruence with their own values. We use the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm in all of our work, learning about students, having an opportunity to hear from them about an experience or an incident that they've been involved in, and moving that conversation as quickly as we can to one that is grounded in reflection and action plans towards the future, with always that opportunity to provide additional evaluation and follow-up. Why do we do this work? We're passionate about it, and we all are always trying to equip our students to learn how to respect the dignity of all members of the community, the larger community as well, and to respond with honesty and integrity in their actions, and then accept responsibility for those actions. That way they are equipped to be people for others, and to be a positive influence in the world as they set the world on fire. This next slide provides a short video of our office services.
Welcome to the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict at Gonzaga University. The Resolution Center is responsible for reconciling issues of student misconduct. Our processes provide transformative opportunities as we guide students to engage in ethical discernment, develop enhanced decision-making skills, and learn to accept ownership for actions. We aspire to create an environment in which community members appreciate the importance of intrinsic ownership, accountability for actions, and a willingness to make things right. Exemplify honesty and integrity as community values. Understand that needs of individuals are balanced with the needs of the community and the common good. Listen to different perspectives and repair relationships to coexist civilly and safely. Demonstrate a positive, non-adversarial orientation towards other community members. Learn from setbacks and not let them become obstacles that define identity or limit future success. ZAGs are members of an exemplary learning community entrenched in the Jesuit underpinning. As a Jesuit institution, Gonzaga and the Resolution Center hold students and community members to a higher standard of conduct. Gonzaga's expectations of conduct are designed to develop individuals who lead lives of leadership and service for the common good. This is a high calling, beyond the basic standards of our society. The spirit of Jesuit education is to consistently strive for magis, meaning actions and decisions that better serve the universal common good, with attention to the whole person, intellectual, spiritual, physical, and emotional. Therefore, we integrate the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, context, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation into our conduct processes. The Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict is committed to care, concern, and accountability with respect to student conduct, our students, and the community as a whole. Our philosophy is the Zagway, a commitment to community. The Zagway manifests principles in 4 areas: foundations, connections, ownership, and accountability. In order to build a strong community, you need a strong foundation. The first pillar of the Zagway is foundations. The Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict is charged with maintaining Gonzaga's Student Code of Conduct. This includes publishing the Student Code of Conduct and changes when necessary, as well as enforcing the code to uphold the expectations that Gonzaga has for its students. The Resolution Center focuses on educating students about policies, expectations, and standards, and fostering congruence between these and the students' attitude towards them, while also empowering students to implement behavioral changes in their lives. Through various developmental outcomes, reflective prompts, restorative questions, the Resolution Center has established learning outcomes and structure for students matriculating through the conduct process. The Resolution Center is also responsible for maintaining student conduct records. With the foundation in place, we can develop connections. The second pillar of the Zagway is connections. Through various trainings, workshops, and presentations, the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict allows community members to gain tools necessary to build our exemplary learning community. Some of the connections highlights include education on community standards, how to build group expectations, and conflict resolution consultations. A strong foundation and sturdy connections provided through the Zagway would fail to stand without the integrity of ownership. The third pillar of the Zagway is ownership. It is the responsibility of all individuals to take ownership of their role in the Gonzaga community. Ownership occurs when parties accept their role and actively work to repair relationships and restore community. When an alleged violation has occurred, a harm has been identified, and the responsible party has accepted responsibility for their role, the Resolution Center may address the situation through alternative resolution processes, grounded in restorative justice concepts. By including community members who have been harmed by the alleged violation, the Resolution Center not only addresses the violation, but repairs the situation in a holistic manner. However, not every situation is appropriate for ownership processes. In these cases, the Resolution Center utilizes conduct processes. The fourth pillar of the Zagway is accountability. The Resource Center resolves alleged violations of the Student Code of Conduct through a student conduct resolution process. This process might include meeting with a conduct officer to resolve first-time or minor violations, or meetings with a group of conduct officers to resolve allegations that are more significant in nature. These processes are designed to hold students accountable, and outcomes are focused on repairing the community and meeting the needs of students. No matter which process is scheduled, students will have a chance to talk with conduct officers about what happened, and the officers will not make a decision until they have considered all of the information. The conduct officers will make their decision based on a preponderance of evidence standard, and that means what is more likely to have happened. In striving for magis, the Resolution Center looks to do more and be more. We rely on assessments to determine the efficacy of the Zagway pillars. Some of the things we measure include a student's ability to communicate their thoughts and feelings about incidents, take ownership of their actions and recognize the impact of those actions, understand the point of view of those affected by their actions, and understand their responsibilities as members of the Gonzaga community. Now that you know a little bit more about what we do, Here's how to connect with the professional staff, trained conduct officers, and facilitators in the Resolution Center for Student Conduct and Conflict. The Resolution Center is located in the Crosby Center. We may be reached by phone at 509-313-4009 or by email at resolutioncenter@gonzaga.edu. Come join us and become a part of the Zagway.
Our next topic in this session is talking about an overview of moral disengagement concepts. And again, I hope that you will find this a helpful tool as you work with your students to move them towards greater moral maturity. Here are some of the concepts. When people are disengaging morally or ethically, there's some justification that goes on. What does that mean? It means that we're making the behavior socially acceptable before it even occurs. Having that self-talk or that self-speak about justifying what it is that we're planning on engaging in. Euphemistic labeling, using language that makes the behavior seem more respectful, more respectable, or not as serious or as intentional as it is. Advantageous comparison, a perception that we have that sometimes the conduct is influenced by what we compare it against. So I'm going to engage in A, but at least that's not as bad as if I engaged in Z. Displacement of responsibility, distorting the relationship between actions that have occurred and any kind of effect of those actions, and not being able to articulate how others are harmed. Diffusion of responsibility, less inclined towards responsibility, seeing that others are equally and sometimes even more considered responsible than the individual who is engaged in the actions. Disregarding or misrepresenting consequences. When we do that, we're able to recall information that makes us feel good and about some of the potential benefits about what happened or what we are engaging in, but we're probably not going to be able to recall any of the harmful effects. And the last is dehumanization, meaning that we're denying the humanity and the dignity of others. We're not treating them with the same amount of empathy as we would like to receive ourselves. Or on the extreme scale, it would mean that we are justifying actual abusive treatment. So this is a short clip about something that I'm assuming that many of your families and or parents and guardians have maybe identified with as you had new drivers in your family.
Mom, Dad, hi. I had a very minor fender bender tonight in an unreasonably narrow fast food drive-thru lane. But what a powerful life lesson. And don't worry, I have everything handled. I already spoke to our Allstate agent, and I know that we have accident forgiveness, which is so smart on your guys' part. Like the fact that they'll just forgive you. 4 weeks without the car. Okay, yep, good night.
With accident forgiveness, your rates won't go up just because of an accident. Switching to Allstate is worth it.
Hopefully any of you who have experienced that, the accidents were not too serious and truly were fender benders. But I'm assuming that you picked up some concepts related to moral disengagement, some euphemistic language that was going on, some justification that was going on, and some advantageous comparison. So let's flip the switch now and talk about real world experiences and the kinds of things that your students may be experiencing in college and how moral disengagement can play into those circumstances. We'll use this particular scenario on a couple of slides throughout this presentation. So here's the context. Your student has been invited to a party or a gathering in a residence hall on campus. They were easily able to locate the room because they heard the music once they entered the hallway. When they got to the room, they noticed that some of the students who were present were drinking bottles of beer, maybe wine, and hard seltzer. There were also some snacks, and there was quite a bit of unopened alcohol that was either in the refrigerator or in the room. People were dancing, and a lot more people started to arrive. The room got hot, and it got crowded. During this time, your student did eat some snacks. About an hour after your student arrived, your student decided to consume alcohol and proceeded to drink 2 cans of White Claw seltzer. A little bit after that, a member of the residence life staff knocked on the door. So here's what moral disengagement might look like in this setting. If you're talking with your student, moral justification would look like, well, gosh, everyone drinks alcohol. I mean, at least on Saturday nights after we're unwinding from a hard week. Euphemistic labeling, but it was just a tiny little get-together. There were only about 25 people in Aaron's room. It wasn't that big of a deal. Advantageous comparison. Some people wanted to drink earlier, but we waited. We decided to drink not until 9 o'clock, and we did make sure we ate something. Displacement of responsibility. The RA was really the person. They were responsible because they were rude and snarky when they approached the room. Diffusion of responsibility. I'm pretty sure no one complained about the noise. There were a lot of loud parties that night. Disregarding or misrepresenting consequences or ownership for actions. I don't care, it's no big deal. If I have to go to that alcohol education class, whatever. And then dehumanization. Gosh, when campus security arrived, they just wanted to ruin our fun. They are the absolute worst. These are clues for you, and they're clues for us as well, to where we can meet students to then help them move on the continuum towards moral maturity. So sometimes we start with a negative, which we did, and then we're going to move to the positive, because this is the world we want our students to develop the skills to be able to live in. So what does moral maturity look like? Moral agency and sense of self. What that means is that when we have agency, we do believe that we have the ability to make decisions. And it helps us appreciate our responsibilities to act for the common good. Our sense of self means that we have authority of our voice. And it helps us choose behaviors and start to realize that our choices affect others. So what would that look like? Instead of saying everyone drinks on a Saturday night, you might hear, I saw a lot of alcohol in the room, and I really thought about whether or not I needed to stay at the gathering. Or the music was super loud, and so at one point I did encourage people to turn it down because maybe it was affecting other people in the residence hall. Harnessing cognitive ability. That cognitive ability plays out not only in the classroom, but in extracurricular and lifetime experiences as well. And to resolve an ethical or moral conflict, we have to be able to identify who's being affected and to make trade-offs and evaluate our intentions. We call this abstract thinking. And morally mature people are going to be able to make better use of data and be able to see when the information is in tension with their beliefs and their values and start to revise that thinking a little bit. In these instances, you might hear your students say, gosh, once there were about 20 people there, I really started thinking about whether or not if this was a good idea. Or you might hear, now that I think about it, I do remember that you told me it's really important that I keep my priorities straight. Going there that night may or may not have done that. Next is emotional resources. And that means knowing that reactions that we have emotionally might or may not be in line with our values. And if we can learn to resist those impulses, it helps provide important skills in self-discipline so we can attain our goals. You might hear students say, 2 students freaked out when the RA arrived and they hid under the bed. That didn't seem like that was the right approach. Or potentially your student might have a reflection on how their emotional response was not the appropriate response. Social skills. Social skills for morally mature people means that they understand themselves and they start to learn to understand others. They know that group norms and peer pressures are going to affect behavior. But mature individuals stay committed to their values when they're faced with these pressures. This is a huge area for our students. A sense of belonging and loyalty to peer groups in the college environment is an important part of a collegiate experience, and developing those intimate relationships that you will have with your peers probably for the rest of your life. But navigating that pressure or those group norms or perceived group norms many times comes into conflict with a student's personal values. Our office spends a significant amount of time talking to students about this tension. What you might hear in this area is, now that I think about this, I actually think that maybe everybody was just getting caught up in the moment. The next moral maturity element is using principles. A lot of theorists have described various principles as important, whether it's empathy or justice or other kinds of concepts. But nonetheless of what those important parts are, always morally mature people understand that there might be conflicts between principles and then the circumstances that you find yourself in. And they understand that standards and relationships are what actually hold communities together. So what you might hear there is, gosh, Mom, I want to rebuild trust with you because I didn't really think about how the stress and pressure of what I did is affecting you and our relationship. The next section is respecting others. When we're morally mature, it means that we value other people simply because they are people. Morally mature people also know that we're part of a greater collective than themselves. This so much speaks to institutional mission regarding to helping our students become people for other people and in service to other people. So what might you hear if someone is demonstrating that type of maturity? You might hear something like, I really didn't prefer how some of the students that were at the party were being disrespectful to people. I mean, I think that they're just doing a job and it's a really hard job. And it made me uncomfortable when people were being belligerent. The next phase is sense of purpose. And wow, this is a tough one. Our purpose is about our way of proceeding or how it is that we're going to live our lives. Mature folks recognize the importance of that process and are not always solely focused on what's going to happen or what's happening next, but being present and being in service to others is a common experience among people who can demonstrate exemplar moral maturity. How does that play out for students? You might hear a concept such as, I actually, after that incident happened, I sat down and I spent some time developing a balance between what I'm going to do in my social life and with the things that I want to accomplish this semester. So you know better than I what the conversation starters are that need to happen and what the first year freedoms are that are important for your family unit. Here's some that might be good conversation starters or things that you need to talk with your students about to start bridging that gap between moral disengagement and moral maturity. It might be time management. It might be opportunities like in the last slide, trying to figure out how to balance a social life, an out-of-class life with academic priorities or work priorities. Setting goals and getting the steps and the action plans towards those goals. What about healthy and well-being decisions? When to eat, what to eat, sleeping, exercising, meditating, decision-making skills, peer, roommate, and intimate relationships. Your students will be exposed to a lot of new folks, and we hope that they develop good relationships. But what's that going to look like when there's conflict? Academic performance and study habits. Substance use is a big one, and we will talk about that a little bit more. And on a positive note, it means that students are going to start doing their own laundry. Hopefully you don't have to talk to them about that. So what are some of those strategies for that proactive collaboration that you can have with your student with some of those topical areas? Number one, would really recommend that you review general expectations for standards of behavior with your student. You'll find that Gonzaga University's Student Code of Conduct at www.gonzaga.edu/Student Code of Conduct. Within the code, you'll find policies and procedures related to expectations for the institution. Number two, would recommend that you pay special attention to alcohol and drug-related policies. Gonzaga University does follow federal, state, and local laws regarding substance use. So it's important that you're informed and your student is informed about what those expectations are. Once you've looked at those resources, number three is a recommendation that you engage in family dialogue about those conduct expectations. What is the understanding? Can your student articulate what those expectations are? Number four is making certain the conversation includes sharing your values and beliefs. Maybe it's on a topic such as alcohol or drug consumption, or decision-making, or expectations and values related to potential risky sexual behavior. Talk with your student also about their value set and their decision-making in alignment with their values, so you get some impression and interpretation of what they're thinking about based on their beliefs. 5, discuss and empower your student to distinguish between good and bad decisions when it comes to not only their behavior, but how they're engaging in healthy decisions and safe decisions. Maybe some of these are some scenarios or some back and forth between what would you choose when and how. 6 is create an atmosphere of ongoing open communication. And that includes demonstrating respect for your student as an emerging adult. I know you've done your jobs extremely well, and hopefully all of the values and beliefs that you have given to your students, you'll see operationalized while they're at GU. But they are also emerging adults and might have a few different opinions. And so being open to listen to that. So some bumps and bruises. There are a few common issues that in the Resolution Center, we find that we're spending most of our time working with students on. The first one is by far the most common. Working with students who have violated our alcohol policy, generally speaking, students under the age of 21 who are consuming alcohol and or are intoxicated. And many times then there's also other resulting behaviors that happen because of overconsumption and intoxication, such as vandalism or other kinds of belligerent behavior, or unfortunately, occasionally even assaultive type of behavior, verbally or physically, usually as a result of alcohol consumption. Marijuana use. You may be aware that the state of Washington indicates that individuals over the age of 21 can legally participate in marijuana use for recreational purposes. However, Gonzaga University follows federal guidelines related to marijuana, and as a scheduled drug is not permitted by any of our students regardless of age. Third, as far as common issues that we see, and this has been on the rise, and so your assistance is helpful as well. We're seeing less civility among our students. And we are seeing more circumstances where students are failing to comply, either by running away from situations, hiding under beds, lying about who they are, or becoming belligerent or disrespectful when university officials are trying to do their job. You can find a lot of information on our website, and there will be a link later, that provides you with additional information about the kinds of behaviors and the frequency of those behaviors that we deal with in our office. So let's do some quick myth busting though, because as you can see, we are shifting to conversations of, oh my gosh, what happens if my student gets in trouble? So just to clarify, only about 5% of the GU student population actually matriculates through our office on an annual basis. And very few students matriculate through the process more than one time. We spend a significant amount of time with a handful of students. Generally, on a yearly basis, there's less than 50 students that are on conduct probation. So when you hear your student say, everyone is on conduct probation, you're now armed with different kind of information. Approximately 5 or fewer students may be residentially reassigned if we determine that a particular community or a fresh start in a community would be best for your student. So also if you hear your student indicate that students are always being reassigned by the Resolution Center, that's not accurate information. It is accurate that we assign hundreds and hundreds of educational and developmental outcomes for our students. That includes reflection assignments, research projects, informational interviews, modest conversations with a mentor, alcohol and drug education workshops, ethics development workshops. The list goes on as far as opportunities, that those transformative opportunities that we try to provide for students. And another that is true statement, not a myth, that surveyed students in our office overwhelmingly do report that they believe that they were heard and listened to, that it was a respectful process, that they do have better clarity about what university expectations are, and that going through the process helped provide them with some important closure. So in the rare circumstance that the 5% applies to you, here's some strategies for more reactive collaboration if there is something that happens that seems to be a violation of university standards. The first would be to leverage your own personal values and beliefs. You've already had those conversations on the front end, and so you can leverage that in a follow-up conversation, as well as acquired knowledge that you have and reviewed with your student about university expectations and your own personal expectations. Number 2, you know a lot more now about moral disengagement, and just completely stay out of that nonsense and that vortex with your student when you hear some of those comments that were listed earlier in this presentation. Push your students towards moral maturity and encourage conversation that lands in that sphere. 3, promote student self-authorship and ownership using pause, guide, reflect questions, which we'll cover in just a minute. 4, intersect with campus resources when appropriate. Most of the time, your students are going to be able to handle issues on their own, but know that the campus resources that we have are always available when appropriate. Number 5, when something has happened, make sure you ask your student about the situation. Give them an opportunity to tell you what happened. Number 6 is super important. Listen to their response. What are they sharing? What are you hearing related to their thoughts and feelings? How much of it is emotional response that's not grounded in moral maturity? And do we need to take a pause? Number 7, encourage your student to take an active role in resolving the incident. This is an important step and is sometimes hard as your students matriculate towards emerging adulthood. But by them taking the active role to resolution, it helps them learn to feel empowered to accept responsibility for actions. And that develops confidence and it helps them learn how to be self-reliant. Number 8, absolutely support your students and provide that support when they're going through the process, but also identifying how you're balancing that with what type of accountability you are putting into place based on your family values. 9, at some point, visit our center's information about our notification policy for findings of responsibility for substance use, as well as other questions that hopefully will be answered for you about your role and about the student conduct process. So this is the pause, reflect, guide questions that were mentioned on the previous slide. These are a lot of the same kinds of questions that we ask students through our resolution processes. These are designed to help you have some talking points, right? When your student doesn't know what to do, help them be able to discern and articulate that. What are they faced with as far as challenges and potential solutions, and how would those work out? If your student is demonstrating that a decision just isn't feeling right, that might be a values or an ethics tension or congruence issue. So asking point blank questions about whether or not the actions are in alignment with values or what that critical voice is saying. And if a decision that's been made has consequences that require accountability, which is not a bad thing, talking to students more about moving through that process, giving them a chance to heal, but also talking about how other people have been affected and how they potentially need to be healed, as well as how they move towards making things right and how it is they're going to put action plans in place. This is a quick chart to give you information about what happens when we receive a report of alleged misconduct. I'm not going to go into depth. You now have it as a resource that you can reference at any point. And if you go to our website at www.gonzaga.edu/resolution center, you'll find this resource, more specific information that outlines the student conduct process, as well as an additional video that walks you through the steps. Let's talk a little bit about alternative resolution and restorative justice. This is under the ownership pillar of the Zagway. In these circumstances, these processes are grounded in restorative justice. We use restorative processes in all of our settings with students. However, these are more structured and specific to those restorative justice concepts. In these circumstances, a facilitator or facilitators from our office and/or other campus partners will meet with students and people who have potentially been affected by those actions when it appears that ownership actions are being demonstrated, and whoever the responding student or students are wants to repair that harm. An example that I will provide is last year, we had a student who caused some damage in a classroom. The student came to our office to express remorse related to that and indicating that they wanted to know how it was that they made that situation right and whole again. During these processes, it goes through a facilitated process to allow everyone to give their story and interpretation about what happened. The facts, the thinking, the feeling, before, during, and after, and starting to talk about the effects of those behaviors. The conversation then moves to identifying what people need for that holistic healing. What is important? What needs to change? How can it be addressed? And lastly, then how will it be addressed? What kinds of things are going to fix the problem or address the situation? And how is it that we as a community are going to go forward in making things right? This is a quick video that gives you some additional context about restorative justice processes. And that's it. You are well on your way. This is going to be an exciting journey this year. We are so glad that you've decided to join the Zag Nation and the Zag family. Following, you'll see contact information for our office, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Also, feel free to reference these materials in the future. We look forward to working with you. Go Zags!